Yo, what's up, everyone? Today is April 24th, 2025. This is Real Sankara Hours, your favorite Pan-African socialist political podcast where we talk about news, current events, black politics, race, etc., from a black left perspective, and not just like the broad black left. Like, we have an actual ideology. It's basically Pan-Africanism and socialism. So we're coming from that perspective, and it's definitely gonna tie into what we have to talk about today. This is a free episode, so if you want to support us and support independent black media, all our information is in the show notes, the description. Go to realsankarahours.org. You can become a patron on our Patreon for $5 a month to access bonus episodes. We also have a YouTube channel, so more of our current free episodes are being uploaded on YouTube, so that's another way for you guys to listen to our episodes. So we're on YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, all that fun stuff. I believe Apple Music. Anyway, if you want to get that out of the way, a little bit of housekeeping. I'm Adam Hudson. I'm not going to give my Twitter because I don't... If you want to follow me, don't go to my Twitter. Just go to my Instagram.
It's X, the everything app. Come on.
Yeah, fuck X and fuck Elon Musk. I'm not fucking calling it X. Actually, we'll be talking about Elon Musk this episode as well. But yeah, I'm Adam Hudson. If you want to follow me, just follow me on Instagram at adam.hudson5 on Instagram. That seems to be like where, well, for me at least, like, it's where you can stay up to date with like politics, it seems. So yeah, I'm on Instagram. Follow me on Instagram at adam.hudson5 on Instagram, and then for Real Sankara Hours, all our information is below. And here's my co-host, my amazing co-host.
Yeah, and this is Peter. I'm MGunn. I'm not really posting these days, so
yeah,
no point in trying to follow me yet. One day I'll get back to submitting my precious ideas to the content machine outside of this podcast, but I just don't really have time or energy to post because I'm too busy being a wage slave. So
yeah, shit is, I don't know, Twitter has went downhill since Elon Musk bought it and changed it to X. Twitter's a fucking shit show. Like, if you want, Twitter is good if you if you really want
your social security benefits, apparently you got to go on to X to...
Oh right, yeah, because Elon Musk's trying to get into fintech, right, or some shit.
Well, is just like, honestly, one of the cruelest things I've ever heard is to make the boomers have to navigate social media to get their social security checks. You're not even trying. And, in my entire life, I've always been told the one thing you don't mess with in American politics is social security. And yet here they are. And so, the Republicans seem to be really doing a bang-up job so far in new fascist America. But
yeah, there's so much to talk about. Actually, on that note, let's actually, because you and I, Peter, we were talking right before we started recording about the Fight Oligarchy tour with Senator Bernie Sanders and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, otherwise known as AOC. So what are your thoughts? Because I think I said this on the previous free episode before, but I don't know if I fleshed out my thoughts that much. But I look at the Fight Oligarchy tour as I think it's pointless. There's some utility, but I don't really have a lot of faith in it, and I don't want to completely write off the energy that's being put into it. But I don't have a lot of faith in the Fight Oligarchy tour. Like, what are your thoughts, Peter? Like, 'cause we were talking about it before we hit record.
I had a friend ask me if I was gonna, because I'm in Chicago area, and he asked me if I was gonna go up to Kenosha to see Bernie. I was like, hell no. On a personal level, like, I can't give the Democratic Party any more of my energy. It's not worth it. From an analytical standpoint, I find it to be interesting. Like, clearly they're trying to do a left Tea Party. It took them like this long to, I guess, get the structure. Our revolution has been, like, Bernie's PAC has been, trying to, like, primary Democrats and kind of force the party left. And they haven't really done a good job of it, because the party is basically about fundraising, and the consultant class, and AIPAC especially, is going to win almost every time. But it does seem that, like, the centrists understand, the party insiders, however you want to phrase it, they understand that the brand of the Democratic Party is at an all-time low, and they understand that if you don't get, like, the youth and, the workers, and not just, like, because we still have this idea, like, Democratic insiders and political strategists still have this idea that, like, the working class is, like, all factory workers in the Rust Belt or coal miners in Kentucky, and not, service economy workers. If you don't get the service economy workers, like, engaged, then you're just not going to have a party that wins. And so they have to do that. And it seems like they're recognizing that, like, oh, yeah, like, economic populism overall does win. It's a better message than, like, everything's great. And, just look at these bad guys over here. But how are they going to co-opt it? And, or, is our revolution in the fight, this time around, is it for real? It seems like they're getting a lot of older, like, they're getting Biden voters and, like, Democratic Party dead enders. And it's like the Bernie base is, like, pretty checked out at this point, because we've been burned too many times. So, it's like, now you guys, after you spent, the last election cycle running a literal dead man, now you're like, oh, we should have listened to you all along. Well, that's what being on the left is, being right ahead of time and getting no satisfaction from it. So, are they gonna, like, primary, shit libs? They're gonna try, but, I do think, like, until they can reconcile the issue of Palestine, because, like, it is a significant issue in the Democratic base, and not just on, like, a moral level, but also on the level of, like, how many Democrats take so much money from AIPAC, and the role AIPAC, the Israeli lobby, has in Democratic Party politics. Until I see them willing to, like, and there's a smart way to go about it, and there's a less smart way to go about it, sure. But until I see them willing to actually take that on, then yeah, I don't really have many hopes for it.
Yeah. So as you were talking, so, like, what she just said reminded me of so David Hogg. So for those who probably heard the name, but, like, perhaps need a refresher, he was he was one of the students at the Parkland shooting. The Parkland High School or something like that. I forgot the high school's name, but that high school
in Parkland, Florida.
Yeah. So he was very outspoken about gun control and the issue of mass shootings at schools. And so, that was a while ago. He was, I believe, a senior at the time. Now he went to Harvard. Now he's in his mid-20s, and so he's now, I believe, I think a co-chair of the Democratic National
Vice
Committee.
Chair.
What's that?
I think he's vice chair of the DNC.
Right, yeah. He's like
Whatever
vice chair.
means.
Yes. Yeah, so he has been pushing for primarying Democratic incumbents who are basically like, to use your term, Peter, like shit libs, or basically like, he's trying to push the Democratic Party closer to like the left, or really like left of center, and to basically like represent where the actual energy of the base is at. But he's been getting some pushback from some of the older heads in the Democratic Party. So I saw like this interview with James Carville. So for those of you who don't remember, he's some motherfucker from Louisiana. He has like, I think he's Cajun. So like, I mean, if you listen to him talk, he has like that kind of thick ass like Cajun accent. So he became a household name. This dude's fucking 80 years old. I had to look him up. He's 80 years
so
old.
old. Like,
he is goddamn old. Like, fucking old as shit.
yeah. I mean, he really, like, I don't even know if, like, the party itself is literally rocking with Carville at this point. But he was dumb enough to be like, well, they should just go. He wants a split, and he wants, like, the centrists to keep the Democratic Party. And it's just like,
yeah.
This is not, and I'm not saying this on a personal, like, what I want. I'm just saying, like, if the Democratic Party cares about being in power, like, this is what they should do objectively.
Right.
And, these old people, they just got to recognize when to step aside. Like, they held on for so long, and they have to recognize not only, like, they're old, but they don't understand what's going on. They don't understand where people are at.
No.
And there's just, like, as we said on, like, the last one, even in 1932, in the middle of the Great Depression, when the Republican Party had economics had completely discredited themselves, FDR did not run on, well, look at these guys, but also we're not going to do anything for you. It's just like, these guys suck. They were able to organize a coalition, bring in organized labor, and create the New Deal. And, you got to do something at least, like, kind of on that level. Like, people are really upset and shook, for the people who believed in American democracy. Watching this happen is giving them a really hard time. Yeah, the Democratic Party has to actually do political work. And they have to actually bring people on for an actual program. And, it's like, the abundance agenda or whatever is also stupid and nobody likes it. And, the AOC Bernie tour, he's even at Coachella, which I thought he had just kind of showed up, but he was like on stage, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. Actually, let me jump in. Just James Carville. So like he's a political consultant. He was nicknamed the Raging Cajun. He has a kind of like like he has a. That's how he talks. So, it's a miracle that people can understand what the fuck he's saying. But
he came up on the Clinton campaign.
Yeah, he was a lead strategist in Bill Clinton's 1992 presidential campaign. And a reason why he's important and why he's so influential is he was the one who came up with the whole triangulation strategy of the 90s. That was him. So basically, triangulation is essentially like you look at the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and you try to carve out like a perfect middle between the two. Like that's what, and Bill Clinton, was known for that, throughout the 90s. So it's basically like, it's essentially, yeah, triangulation is a strategy where like you carve out a centrist position, but you basically adopt some ideas from your political opponent, essentially. So an example of triangulation would be like welfare reform in the 90s. Like that was under Bill Clinton. He really gutted welfare in the 90s, and he borrowed that idea from the Republican Party. So and it was all part of like this essentially, well, there was a Republican revolution where the Republicans took over like the House, took over Congress in the 90s, Newt Gingrich. And by the way, like if you watch MSNBC, so Joe Scarborough, the pundit, he was also a congressman who got elected right around that time. He was part of like that 90s Republican revolution. Anyway, so, and triangulation in that era of 90s Democratic Party centrism, that's Barack Obama comes from that school of thought, basically. And this is basically like these are Democrats who wanted to distance themselves from like what they felt as like too liberal within the Democratic Party, because this is all, keep in mind, it's all in the context of, I would put this in the context of post-Cold War politics. So when the Cold War ended, the Soviet Union collapsed. During that time, and I don't know, like I haven't done like a demographic check on our audience, but let's say like there are a lot of, Gen Z folks who are within the left and who are politicized and who are probably too young to remember this. So to kind of give you a little bit of history lesson. So after the Cold War ended, basically the idea was there is no alternative to capitalism, essentially. That liberal capitalism won and communism lost. And so the approach for the Democratic Party to basically like, I guess, stay relevant in the times was to distance themselves from anything that reeked of like, in terms of their policy, to be like what they want to distance themselves from, essentially the part of the party's platform that would advocate for social welfare and government intervention in the economy. So how does that relate with James Carville? He was a political consultant for Bill Clinton in the 90s, and he was one of the people who advocated political triangulation. So Bill Clinton would essentially borrow ideas from the Republican Party, but then like have a more Democratic Party spin on it. So the era of neoliberalism, that in terms of where we're at right now in 2025, where like neoliberalism, like that whole political order is collapsing in legitimacy, you can thank people like James Carville for bringing it to fruition. Like people like James Carville are the reason why like we went through fucking like Democratic Party neoliberalism from the 90s through the 2000s, and where someone like Bernie Sanders is like basically a response to that. So James Carville I forgot he was being interviewed by somebody, and like he was basically shitting on David Hogg. Because David Hogg, who, he's the vice chair of the DNC, he was on MSNBC speaking with I believe Simone Sanders, and he was saying that the Democratic Party, like he was advocating for primarying quote unquote ineffective Democrats, essentially, because there is like a split within the Democratic Party, because like the Democratic Party like really got like they got a major shellacking in 2024. And so now, like, there's this some bit of I wouldn't even say soul searching, but to your point, Peter, I think you're right the way you characterized it. The Democratic Party is starting to realize that if they want to remain relevant as a party, as an institution, then they're going to have to like concede some things to the progressive wing of the party, or change things up, because again, the Democratic Party got their asses kicked in 2024. Now, actually, before we recorded, I was watching the news. I typically watch like that channel, that YouTube show, Breaking Points, with Crystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty, and then they'll also have like Ryan Grimm and Emily. I forgot her last name.
Kaczynski, I think.
Kaczynski, yeah. I remember it was I think she had like her last name, I believe, was like Polish or something. I just forgot her last name. But anyway, so like, but today it was Sagar and Crystal, and in one of the segments they talked about how the demographics that Trump won in 2024, namely young men and Latinos, those demographics have now turned on Trump because of the fucking trade war, which is, we're going to talk about that pretty soon. So yeah, like and those are demographics that like typically would vote for the Democratic Party, like young people, Latinos, other ethnic minorities, right? So like Trump was able to pick off some of the demographics that would typically go for the Democratic Party, which is why, again, I think the Democratic Party, they're realizing now that, again, to stay relevant as a party, they're going to have to change things up. So hence why, like, you know, there's a split between people like James Carville and David Hogg. And David Hogg's solution is to primary basically Democrats like James Carville, like ineffective Democrats. And, you know, the party leadership obviously did not like that. So James Carville, you know, he had some not nice things to say about David Hogg. And then I just pulled up this article right now that was released yesterday, but updated today in NBC News. DNC chair rebukes David Hogg for pushing primaries against Democratic incumbents. So there are a lot of party leaders. So like, okay, so this is what DNC chair Ken Martin said. He said, let me be unequivocal. No DNC officer should ever attempt to influence the outcome of a primary election, whether on behalf of an incumbent or a challenger. Voters should decide who our primary nominees are, not DNC leadership. Our role is to serve as stewards of a fair, open, and trusted process, not to tilt the scales.
Ha!
Yeah, I mean,
wow.
I mean, we could go back to 2020 and see what they did with Sanders.
You guys created super delegates,
right? Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, and so yeah, you know, like David Hogg ruffled a little bit of feathers with the party leadership, and so connecting it with like, okay, this Fight Oligarchy tour, right? This is why I think it's a joke, and like what I was just bringing up with David Hogg and versus James Carville, for me, like vindicates why I think this is that basically, well, there's kind of like this old saying within some segments of the left is that the Democratic Party is basically the graveyard of social movements. Like that is where social movements go to die, right? So I'll give you an example. The anti-war movement during the Iraq War. There was a lot of like anti-war sentiment during the Iraq War, particularly around 2006 and 2007 when it was in Bush's second term that there was a lot of frustration with the Iraq War, because by then it was clear that the reasons that the Bush administration gave for the Iraq War, which was that like Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction and was buddy with al-Qaeda and had a role to play in 9/11, all that proved to be bullshit. So there was a lot of like anti-war sentiment, and it was actually during that time, like in 2000, yeah, it was 2007. I was a sophomore at Stanford, and that's when I got involved in college activism and particularly college anti-war activism. And then it was right around the same time I got involved in Palestine solidarity activism on campus. But there was anti-war sentiment right around that time. But the person who really sucked up that energy and killed it was a guy by the name of Barack Obama. Because when he ran in 2008, the thing that distinguished him from Hillary Clinton is that he was against the Iraq War from the very beginning, whereas Hillary Clinton was not, and she had like changed her mind. Like that was a major, one of the many things that made Obama a more appealing candidate versus Hillary Clinton during the primary. And the Clinton campaign, they were pretty nasty toward Obama. People forget about that. Like the Clinton campaign, like, you know, try to put out some kind of racist shit about Obama. Anyway, like there's some like stuff that happened around that time that people forgot about. Anyway, but I definitely do remember when Obama was president. A lot of that anti-war sentiment died, and so like when Obama was ramping up drone strikes in Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, a lot of the people who criticized the Iraq War were okay with it. I remember that. And there are a lot of other lefties like me who were active during that time who pointed it out. And also, this is another thing that people have forgot about, like, especially as it relates to the Trump's deportations and his labeling of like Latin American gangs and drug cartels as terrorist groups. Like under the 2001 authorization for use of military force, that gives the president this wide authority to wage war against terrorist groups around the world. Obama expanded it. Trump in his first term continued it. Biden kind of dialed down the drone strikes, but you know, but he didn't go back on the AUMF. During Obama's first term, he actually assassinated a U.S. citizen, Anwar al-Awlaki, in Yemen in 2011. And there's another drone strike like a couple weeks later that killed his 16-year-old son, Abdul Rahman. So I say that because, like, to tie it all together, the Democratic Party is where left movements go to die. That definitely happened during the Obama years. That's why, like, you know, when I told some of my friends about Anwar al-Awlaki, and a lot of people forgot about that. There are a lot of people who forgot, like, Obama literally assassinated a U.S. citizen. So, like, Trump deporting people who are legal residents, as horrific as it is, he's like the pathway for him to do that was already laid out before he got in office. You know, and I think people need to be very, very clear about that and why it's important to be critical of the Democratic Party. That's obviously not to let the Republican Party off the hook, but, you know, the Democratic Party, like, they have a lot of responsibility for this shit as well. So, as it relates to, okay, let's fight oligarchy tour with Bernie Sanders and AOC. What I see is that, like, there is a lot of there have been like a lot of protests, more than I expected, which is a good thing. There have been a lot of people protesting the Trump administration and basically how far Trump has gone, because like Trump is pretty much like a mad emperor. Like he's just drunk at the wheel. Pete
Hegseth is literally drunk at the wheel.
Literally drunk at the wheel. Yeah, like he's like Pete Hegseth is like giving out classified, detailed military operations on fucking Signal chat to people who are like his friends and is like, I think his wife or some shit. And so yeah, he's very. I mean, I don't know, but by the time this gets released, he might be out of the Defense Department. Elon Musk has already stepped down from Doge, but like in the first 100 days, like Trump has obviously angered a lot of people, particularly like the vast majority of the American public. So there's a lot of people who are pissed off at the Trump administration, who are turning on him, even people who are former Republicans. And so like what I've noticed with the Fight Oligarchy tour, those crowds are drawing a lot of basically like MSNBC liberals, people like kind of, you know, Kamala Harris voters, which I think like let me, before I bash the shit out of the tour even more, but let me say something positive. I do think it's good that like there are normie liberals who are becoming more critical of the Democratic Party for not doing enough to fight Donald Trump. I think that's a good thing in terms of just people's consciousness being elevated. So I do think that, like, you know, for those of us on the left, we should welcome that, right? Because everyone's politicization journey is different. So, like, you know, there are a lot of people who are now on the left who were formerly like those people, right? There are a lot of people who were supportive of Barack Obama when he was in office and who have turned further left in recent years, right? So people have room to evolve. That's fine. So I think it's good that, like, there are more, again, mainstream liberals who are going a little further left. I think that's a good thing. Now, this is where I'm going to bash the shit out of it, and where I'm going to be critical. I think it's clear that Bernie Sanders and AOC, their goal is not to create a third party, or to create alternative left-wing institutions that would give the left actual political power. Like, to me, it seems very clear. To me, what seems very clear is that all that energy is going to get sucked back into the Democratic Party, and then we're going to be at, like, square one again. Which, that's why I think, like, I just, it's hard for me to take the Fight Oligarchy tour seriously, because the Democratic Party also has oligarchs, you know. Like,
yeah.
You know, so it's like, okay, fight oligarchy. Okay, you're going to fight the oligarchs in the Democratic Party? You know, are you going to challenge the Democratic Party as a whole? And it's very clear, like, Bernie Sanders, he's shown, not just by his words, but his actions, that he doesn't want to go against the party leadership. He doesn't want to challenge the party. And those who do, someone like David Hogg, who, again, he's the DNC vice chair. He's not even pushing for a third party. He's just saying, like, we should primary Democrats who are ineffective, you know, and the response from other party leaders is very critical. So it's like, okay, even if you try to push the Democratic Party, left, like, you're not going to win. To me, the only way you would actually win is, like, is beyond just creating a third party. Like, the left needs, like, actual stronger institutions outside of the mainstream political system that would give the left actual power to put pressure on the two-party system, and to actually give, like, the base some actual leverage, political leverage. That's where the left is right now. Like, I think the left is right now, there's a lot of anger and energy, and, like, the left will win in terms of, like, let's say, the moral and intellectual arguments, right? That's where I think usually the left's biggest strength is like the moral and intellectual arguments and the moral and intellectual critiques of the two-party system, of capitalism, of white supremacy, imperialism, patriarchy, homophobia, like, the left has robust critiques of those systems. But, you know, without actual political power and leverage, like, that, those arguments just go into the fucking ether. Like, they don't, like, it doesn't materialize into achieving any, like, results. And so, all that energy that we're seeing with the Fight Oligarchy tour, if it just goes back in the Democratic Party, it's like, okay, we didn't achieve anything. If it went into actual, like, okay, mutual aid efforts, other grassroots efforts, unions, other institutions that would actually give the left some political power, some really base building. That's really what we're talking about, like, actual base building for the left. Then I think, like, okay, we'd actually be getting somewhere. But that's clearly not the case with this tour. So anyway, those are my thoughts. That's why I'm shitting on it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Peter?
I think that there's basically, and I don't want to give James Carville too much credit, because Democratic Party has been co-opting social and populist movements since its inception, especially like the Populist Party, which it destroyed and then ran William Jennings Bryan back in the 1890s. It is really its MO, because it's created as a party of the people, but it's run as a bourgeois party. It's a bourgeois party of the people, I guess, versus the Republican Party is just the party of capital. And since most Americans understand themselves to be capitalists and small business owners, whether or not they actually are, it does, pretty well. And for a lot of its history, especially post-Civil War, like the Democratic Party basically were losers. Like they didn't really, they didn't win that many presidencies. I mean, after Johnson, right, it was, there's like almost 20 years there was just like freaking Jimmy Carter, and that was because of Watergate. They basically wait until the Republican Party completely discredits itself, comes in, picks up the pieces, kind of cleans things up, and then doesn't do anything, attacks the left, and then the Republicans come back in, and through sort of the larger imperial American project, like the Republicans are generally understood to be like the better stewards of it, and so that's why right now we are in an interesting time frame, because they are taking this glorious American project and just shredding it to pieces. But it also seems that the institutions, the Supreme Court has, weighed in that, like, you can't just be like, no due process. Like, you have to, like, we used to be smarter about this. Like, you can make up due process. You don't have to just be like, no. That's too much. That's too much. The Jamie Dimon, or, the actual banks that control the country, finally got Trump in a room and was like, you can't do this. You can't start a trade war with China, because China, like, has an actual command economy and an actual, like, mobilized manufacturing base that it is less dependent on America than America is on China. And also they hold, like, a bunch of our debt, actually. And, it got to when you get to a point where, U.S. Treasury bonds are like the most stable financial asset, or it's supposed to be, in existence. So if those are getting sold off, that is really bad. So it, does Trump in a historical sense represent a rupture, or can he be metabolized back into the system? And I think most people understand him, or they want to understand him as a rupture, as a break from what the American political system is supposed to be. But I think the more dangerous thing is that he can be metabolized back into it, and, they're not going to let him be full Hitler, and there's plenty of mini Hitlers running around. I'm like always more afraid of J.D. Vance, who apparently killed the Pope. Because the Pope died one day after meeting him, and
yeah,
I totally get that tracks, as they say. But yeah, it, like, the Republican Party is, all in on fascism, and I think a lot of, there's the MAGA base who like fascism, but I think that, a plurality of the country does not want fascism. And, when the Democratic leadership is just like, all right, well, here's our great plan. We're not going to do anything, and we're just going to, make money and, not do anything. Hold on to what we have and, just let them discredit themselves. And, then we'll be able to come in afterwards, clean it up, and I guess restore our trust on the global scale. And the problem is that because the Democratic Party theoretically is supposed to, like, be an actual mass party, like, the masses of people don't want that. I think it's clear that, the base does not want to just not do anything. They want their country back, quote unquote. So, I think the problem is that right now, um, I'm not going to lie, I haven't listened to any of the speeches, so I don't know exactly what they're saying. I'm just imagining, and the way political rhetoric is these days, I'm usually not wrong, but it seems, it's more of a revanchist movement trying to go back to maybe the Obama days or something, when Democrat voters felt good about the country. And that is really the only time in my lifetime where Democratic voters really felt good about America and they believed in it. They want to believe in it again. The problem is that it really does need to be a transformative movement, because the Claremont Institute, the ideological project that is more in control now, in the second Trump administration, is pretty clear on shredding the institutions, and they're going to continue to do that. And so if you don't have a transformative project on the other side to, basically never allow something like Trump to happen again, then it's, like, they're going to lose in 2028, and we're going to go into a very dark place as a country. And like, the other thing is that, the Claremont Institute, which is like, it's in Claremont College, in Southern California, and it's sort of the more respectable version of the Dark Enlightenment or the neo-reactionary movement, which comes out of Silicon Valley, and that's what Peter Thiel basically believes in. And those people don't actually care about continuing the American empire. They just want total control for themselves, and so they don't actually care. That's why they're letting Trump just completely fuck the bag up, because that's the one thing you cannot do as the president. You can screw over the poor as much as you want and be celebrated for it. Mm-hmm. You cannot fuck over the money. And you're supposed to be a money guy.
Right, exactly.
You cannot do that. But
you can't. Yeah.
But he is. And that's what he's going to continue to do. I don't know how they pivot back to, Bush era Republican neoliberalism, because the base is not mobilized, is not excited by that. They love seeing people deported to El Salvador, which, could end up being a death camp. I think that is probably the idea that they have. And it makes sense because, from what I understand, Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, the millennial crypto bro, is pretty coked out. And, if you study the Nazis, they were on so many drugs especially by the end of it. It's not a sober political movement. Fascism is not a sober political movement, and it's a nihilistic, almost eschatological movement. It has to take things to the end point. And, it's just the Democrat insiders, the consultants, they fundamentally don't know how to fight that. They're bringing PowerPoints to a nuclear war.
Right, exactly.
So
yeah.
Some of them will realize you do have to actually fight, but the thing, the Democratic Party as an institution relies on, procedure and slowing things down so much that it may be too late. So that is why part of me, I think, as I said earlier, part of me hopes they can do it just because it would be nice. But every time I catch myself saying it would be nice if America did this, I'm like, all right, well, I know that's not going to happen. I've long given up feeling good, because that's not about the political system in the United States, because that's not what it's here for. It's not here for me to feel good about it. But there's still enough of, a popular response mechanism that it has to do something when the people that support the Democratic Party are in revolt against it. So, but, Democrats are all-time bag fumblers. So, though that's generally a safe bet to put on what they're going to end up doing.
Yeah, and so lots. There's a lot I want to respond to that. Because so actually that's a kind of good. I mean, you already touched on the trade war, so I actually want to expand on that because, yeah, like I said, we're going to touch on the trade war as well. Because, I mean, well, there is that whole, like, Liberation Day, right? Where it's like Trump just went through, like, this big ass, like, it was like some cardboard shit where it's a list of countries and then, like, the trade deficits and, like,
people think that they did it through ChatGPT, which
right.
I would assume is the case given the intellectual firepower behind it.
I really think it actually was ChatGPT because I've used ChatGPT not for actual work but like as a teacher because, well, a lot of students are using ChatGPT to write their shit. So for those of you who are not teachers, it is increasingly common for students to write, responses to questions or even their essays using ChatGPT. So I actually used ChatGPT just to experiment with it. But based on like how it works, like I'm very sure that they used ChatGPT to come up with those numbers because it sounds like something that would be spit out of ChatGPT. By the way, ChatGPT is not fully accurate or reliable for information. That's when I was teaching my students. That's what I was trying to show them. Is that like, because I busted a number of them on it, and I just went through. I was like, look, you guys may think that ChatGPT is accurate, but it's not. Like it has, for example, ChatGPT has a knowledge cutoff deadline. So ChatGPT it basically synthesizes a shit ton of publicly available information up to September 2021. Also, ChatGPT does not have access to information that is behind a paywall. So, peer-reviewed academic journals that are behind a paywall, ChatGPT does not have access to that. For example, let's use our podcast as an example. ChatGPT wouldn't be able to get information or stuff that we say on our bonus episodes because that's behind a paywall. So ChatGPT doesn't know everything. So, which I think that's why I think that the Trump administration did get those numbers from ChatGPT because like, it gives you a generic answer, but like there's a lot of shit that like context that it overlooks, which was why, like, yeah, those numbers were bullshit because there's like, for example, the country of Lesotho in southern Africa, there's a trade deficit. Yeah, because it's a poor southern African country. They can't afford to buy large numbers of American goods, but America imports a lot of goods from southern Africa, particularly diamonds, right? So there's stuff that the United States cannot produce that we get from other countries, but a lot of underdeveloped countries, they don't have the money to buy a lot of American goods. So hence why you have a trade deficit. So does it make sense to put a fucking tariff on a poor country because there's a trade deficit? Like the logic, like is completely nonsensical. But anyway, I mean, the past couple days and weeks, like the Trump administration has been changing the numbers on like how much to tariff, like Canada, Mexico, China, the European Union, like all these countries, right? And so I think it was a couple weeks ago where like Trump had walked back some of the more like egregious tariffs on other countries and focused more on China is because, again, tying to what you were saying, Peter, like the bond market got spooked out because if there's anything like all these like greedy capitalists and people who are in power, you can fuck over poor people in the U.S. You can fuck over poor people in other countries. You can bomb the shit out of people in other countries. They don't care. Like, the people who care about the stock market, like, they're totally fine with dead Palestinians. As long as it boosts the stocks of defense contractors, they're totally fucking okay with it, right? So, like, these are not, like, moralistic or humanistic or heartful people. Like, these people, what they primarily care about is like the market the market stability, stock prices going up, and like that's what they care about. And they also care about the stability of the U.S. dollar, because since the Bretton Woods arrangement post World War II, the United States became the world reserve currency. So that means when it comes to international trade between two different countries, the trade is often, conducted with using U.S. dollars, right? Also, particularly like when it comes to oil, right? Like when countries want to buy oil, they use U.S. dollars. That is why a lot of countries have, they buy up like U.S. Treasury bonds in U.S. dollars because it's a very valuable asset. And the value of the U.S. dollar globally stems from the U.S. being a reliable trade partner. And also, another part that doesn't get talked about enough is that the U.S. has a shit ton of guns, and it can enforce its primacy in the world, right? So the U.S. has a large number of military bases, and a lot of that is to, secure access, the steady flow of global capital and resources, particularly oil, right? That's why the U.S. has this very strong relationship with not just Israel, but also Saudi Arabia, right? Saudi Arabia is a very key U.S. ally is because of fucking oil, okay? And there's U.S. bases in the Persian Gulf. That's why, the Trump administration has been ratcheting up the U.S. war in Yemen, because the Houthis are they're blocking the port at the Red Sea to protest the genocide in Gaza. And hey, they don't like that. The Trump administration, other oligarchs, they don't like that shit. So, those people, they're totally okay with Trump bombing Yemen, because people Biden and particularly Obama bombed Yemen before Trump, and so they're okay with, the oligarchs are okay with that. But what really spooked a lot of the people in Trump's inner circle was the bond market, and that other countries basically looking at the U.S. and being like, you know what, they're a bunch of crazy motherfuckers. They got this president who, by the way, he was elected. He won the popular vote, unlike in 2020. So it's not just like other countries are really side-eyeing the U.S. In China, I'm not on TikTok a lot, but I know on TikTok, China has been trolling the U.S. and there's one Chinese guy, he made a really good point. He basically said that he basically told Americans directly, you guys don't need tariffs, you need a revolution. And he kind of there are some people particularly in China, they know U.S. history,
yes.
they will, because they're oh, okay, U.S. is gonna call out China for human rights abuses. They'll bring up shit like the MOVE bombing in Philadelphia. They'll call out, because what this shit is showing is that since the 80s, really beginning in the mid 70s and really ratcheting up in the 80s, all of the America's industrial base got outsourced overseas to China and other, at the time, underdeveloped countries, right? And so the emphasis of the U.S. economy became about innovation when it came to the tech sector, finance, but less about actually physically making shit. And so now what this trade war is showing is that China can weather the storm of the trade war because they have a strong manufacturing base. They can choose not to trade with the U.S. and establish trade relations with other countries, like with Canada, the European Union, other countries in Asia and Africa. Now there's China, South Korea, and Japan, who all three of them hate each other, by the way. They're ganging up and trying to establish a trade relationship. Especially China and Japan, they fucking hate each other. China does not like Japan. If you look at the atrocities of the Japanese military in China during World War II, there's some bad fucking blood between China and Japan. Now that China and Japan are united against the U.S., that's saying something.
You have to be an all-time bad person at international relations, as I've seen people point out. And Japan and South Korea, they really... South Korea, for very obvious reasons, because it was basically a Japanese colony. Until World War II, for about 30 years, and we won't get into South Korea right now, but
the dollar, basically, I guess I was going on, but let me just kind of round it out. The oligarchs, I think, was spooked out like people in the Trump administration was like the weakening of the U.S. dollar, and also that like if Trump keeps continuing this tariff trade war with China, because the U.S. gets so much of its goods from China, like we could see basically empty shelves in grocery stores within like 2 weeks. Because if you look at so many products in America, America doesn't produce anything. We really don't. We don't physically make shit. And also, I'll mention this. I just want to kind of bring this up. And I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Peter, as well. But rare earth minerals. So China, rare earth minerals that are crucial for a lot of weapons, defense technology, electronics, consumer goods, medical technology, like the stuff that like make the kind of magnets and components that are in a lot of basic technology that we use today. China has really finessed the processing of rare earth minerals. And so in retaliation for the tariffs, China has placed export restrictions basically against the U.S. So basically what China did is they know that like, okay, well, the U.S. technology relies on a lot of rare earth minerals. China, I believe, processes somewhere like 90% of the world's rare earth minerals. Yeah, there we go. Yep. Yeah, I'm looking at this Reuters article. Yeah, China produces around 90% of the world's rare earths, a group of 17 elements used across the defense, electric vehicle, energy, and electronics industries. The U.S. has only one rare earth mine, and most of its supply comes from China. So China knows this, and so they're like, okay, if the U.S. is gonna keep bullying China, then this is how they're gonna respond. And the U.S. is in a much weaker position to weather the storm of a trade war, whereas China is in, like, they'll get hurt, but probably not as much as the U.S. And so I think, like, that spooked out the oligarchs because, again, they care about the money. They care about the stock market. They care about the stability of international trade. So, like, Elon Musk didn't like this shit because his Tesla vehicles, his electric vehicles, like, rely on rare earths from China. So he didn't like it. You know, he was pleading with Trump to cease the trade war. And then I think, like, you know, when Trump first started walking back the extent of his tariffs, like, it was the bond market that spooked out investors. So, like, people selling off U.S. Treasury bonds. And so just recently, Trump has basically kind of flinched with China. And so, like, he's trying to walk back some of what he said because apparently there are some people in the Trump administration who was, I think what I heard was this guy, Peter Navarro, who's like some fucking nutcase who's been telling him, basically been in Trump's ear to, like, he's kind of the one behind, like, this, promoting this trade war with China. There are some other officials within the Trump administration who were able to get to Trump when Peter Navarro was not in the room and tell Trump to stop doing this because that, you know, it would ruin supply chains and that we could see, like, empty grocery store shelves within, like, 2 weeks. And so that's why Trump is like, I think that happened yesterday, and now it's like, so shit is changing every day when it comes to the trade war. But what's clear is that I think, like, these oligarchs, like, you know, like these people, like the people who run this country and the world, like, again, they're not moralistic people. They're okay with fucking over poor people. They're okay with bombing people. But if you fuck with international trade and finance, and if you fuck with the value of the U.S. dollar, then they get pissed. So
yeah, I mean, if a left president was doing something like this, he'd have been cooed yesterday.
Right, yeah.
The other thing about it is that, you know, on the left, the is China socialist, is it capitalist debate has raged on forever, usually to not much fruition. But it is very clear now, in this era of President Xi's reign, fine, we'll call it that, that it's become a lot more social. Like, the thing about it is that even with Deng Xiaoping, they never gutted, what Mao had built, and they didn't completely forsake Mao the way someone like Khrushchev did, and that was smart because
the way Khrushchev did with Stalin.
Stalin, yes, that was not smart. Whatever you think about Stalin, so they still have Marxism is still taught in schools in China, and they understand themselves to be a socialist country, and they're doing things that a capitalist country could not do.
Yep.
The amount of the ability to go all in on technology and build it in a way that is, much more efficient than the free market is I think demonstrating that they are running a socialist program, and that the Chinese people are willing to endure some short-term pain for, what is a larger historical project that they understand themselves to be in. And they don't need, they've played nice with America because it was necessary in the 90s, but they don't need to do that anymore. And America is in a weird position because they thought that if we just, put McDonald's in China, it'll color revolution, any day now. China's going to collapse any day now. But even when certain sectors of the Chinese bourgeoisie go under, it doesn't threaten the political system because the bourgeoisie in China don't control the party. It's not a bourgeois. The Communist Party of China is not a bourgeois party. So they're able to, it's so silly, but the United States does need some level of decoupling. And I support America rebuilding its manufacturing base, especially as a Midwesterner. I don't think there's really much hope. I don't think there's much hope for that for the Midwest outside of that overall. But it's just, this is not the way to do it. And one thing I found very funny is the amount of people that were like, these business owners, they need to plan for this stuff. And you're like, oh, so you're saying that an economy needs planning? Is that what you're saying? I thought this was the free market. I thought we were just gonna, go balls out and this is the free market, guys. What do you mean you guys need to plan for stuff? Production has to be executed according to plans. That sounds like socialism to me.
Good old central planning.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and America is a planned economy. It's just not planned for the workers. But it's a much larger project that needs to be done. And, I guess I'd never really thought about where rare earth minerals get processed. But obviously they're not being processed in Bolivia or the Democratic Republic of Congo. So, the neo-colonial trade system requires these countries to only ship raw materials that then get processed somewhere else. So yes, it would obviously make sense that because I'm there's no processing, there are no refineries, or there's no processing plants in the U.S. that I've ever heard of for cobalt or anything like that. So yes, that would be a problem. And also, the one thing that the United States is supposed to have supremacy over, which is semiconductor manufacturing. China seems to be doing just fine without it, or they have ways to work around it with NVIDIA. Which I always just want to say, it's very strange to me that NVIDIA is like the most strategic company in the world, because for me, they were always like, oh, yeah, they make graphics cards if you want to play video games. And somehow now they're like, a company that is integral to national security. And, that's just where we are. But, the chip war is something that, like, the United States is, very concerned about. And the sprawling military industrial complex, they do want to confront China and put it back in its place. But it just seems like, doing it like this, like, as everyone has said, you can't just slap tariffs aren't magic. You can't just slap tariffs on and then just be like, all right, well, I guess we're, going to bring back manufacturing, except not the jobs. It's all going to be done with AI. So it won't actually help people. But it's not even doing that, because if you're going to build a factory, you're just going to, that this trade war is not going to last. So you're just going to hold off until it subsides. And yeah, I mean, I guess the fact that Trump has no shame is, I guess, probably a benefit to America, because he'll just act like it didn't happen, I guess is where we are now, because they're, the people that are running this show, they just don't understand how to reshore American manufacturing jobs, and they don't have the patience required to actually do it. So, much less in a way that provides good paying jobs to Americans, because there are some people who are like, yeah, I mean, factory jobs from like the 20s and 30s were, death traps. But I will say, like, as someone who works in the restaurant industry, I very much understand myself in a role of commodity production. And, there are a lot of people who would rather work in a meat processing plant than in a kitchen, because it just, their particular mental issues are more suited to that environment than that of a kitchen. So it's not like there isn't a willingness, but the way it's phrased is just like that's the other thing. It's just like these people who are running this stuff, they have no idea what working in a factory is even like, or, having to be a proletarian and having, your entire subsistence coming from working that job. And they're so far removed from that in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. They really just have no idea, and if only there were organizations of workers that are able to advocate for what the good versions of those jobs would be, but why would we listen to them? So, and I mean, even part of that is like, yeah, well, now that we've destroyed organized labor, now we can bring back the manufacturing jobs, and it'll be fine as long as there's no fucking unions. But I don't think it's gonna work like that. And yeah, I guess, and maybe we can wrap up pretty soon. But at this point, I just got it. I'm just trying to enjoy the ride, I guess, and try to stay on top of what's going on, because this is no way to do politics, but it works in the social media content era because it drives engagement. People have to pay attention because things are changing hour to hour, day to day. And so it makes people engaged, but it also stresses them out. And yeah, I mean, talking to like people who have to like, order supplies for restaurants, it's like a lot of our stuff comes from Canada and Mexico. So why are you like most of our, canola oil stands for like Canadian oil low acid. It comes from Canada. So much of our produce comes from Mexico. It's like these are raw materials, and you're like, why are we slapping tariffs on that? It's not like we're gonna produce that stuff. So that part is something that like, you know, was brought into my life directly, where it's like now and yeah, when it interferes, you know, people, Americans especially, they want to not pay attention to politics. That was the premise of the Biden campaign, is you won't have to pay attention to this.
Actually, sorry to interject, but like to that point, I saw a sign. I think it was like at one of the protests, anti-Trump protests, and it was like, I have to find it, but the sign was like, basically, if Kamala Harris were in office, like, we'd be at brunch. I'm like, that's
what is it with brunch and these people? Jesus Christ, it's not understand. That great, man. Like, I you know what? I would kill for everyone who says that to actually work a brunch service, because it is hell. All right. You people have no see, and this is the disconnect, because it's like the people who want to go back to brunch versus people who have to actually work brunch, and everyone who works in the restaurant industry is pretty uniform in their loathing of working brunch. So, you know, maybe
I can imagine that. It's, to me, what you're saying reminds me of like, I was talking with a friend of mine who, like us, also went to Stanford, and he's a teacher, and he was saying, like, you know, he'll sometimes get weird questions of like, you went to Stanford, like, why are you a teacher? And like, we're talking about it, and like, in addition to service workers, teaching is one of those professions that's like wildly disrespected. Like, it's weird, right? Like, I'll put both our jobs, like service, food industry, and teaching, right? Those are two industries where, like, if they went away tomorrow, people would feel the fucking effect of it. But like, when you're actually doing a job, people don't respect it, right? So it's like, you know, when I was talking to my friend, like, he was saying, like, yeah, like, I think the reason why people say that is, he's saying, like, it says less about us and more about the lack of respect for the profession. But the frustration you're sharing about, like, people working brunch reminds me of, like, some of the frustration that a lot of teachers have when it comes to, this will be for another topic, but like, some of the frustration that teachers have about, like, students and cell phones in class, or like, but anyway, I just want to share that I feel the frustration, because yeah, it is like, it is kind of a luxury, because like, as a teacher, I'm like, I don't have brunch. Like, I get up, have breakfast, go to lunch. Like, brunch is like, who the fuck, like, because like who's the type of person who has the time to go to brunch, right?
People who work in political media.
Yeah, or like, maybe like one of those tech people, I guess.
Yeah,
because I do know, like, definitely, like, in San Francisco, I think there are some restaurants that would cater to tech workers, and I guess that's where they get brunch.
Oh, but God.
I think, I don't know, but it just makes me think, like, yeah, I get the demographic and the type of people who would say that, like, who literally has time for brunch if they're working, right? Because I know as a teacher, we get lunch, which is during normal lunch hours, but a brunch? Like,
brunch is
anyway.
It's on Sunday, I guess.
Yeah.
Usually.
I don't know. I hear, like, people talk about brunch, like, on weekdays and shit. Anyway, I don't want to carry away. My bad. Sorry, go ahead.
But those people are heathens who should be in church. And it's how I feel about it.
They need Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, yes, Jesus, the Palestinian socialist.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that Jesus. Yeah, there we go.
They do need that Jesus. Yeah, so yeah, I guess to reiterate, like, to bring it back full circle, I just think that is where that is like a fundamental contradiction and disconnect in the Democratic Party. Is like, even if they wanted, like, even when they're trying to do progressive politics and progressive campaigns, they just fundamentally don't know how, because they don't talk to the workers. They don't.
Right.
They're not connected to any associations or organizations that the workers may have, and they have no idea what would actually make their lives better. Like, I often say to myself, and I know this is a purely hypothetical thing because it'll never happen, but I was like, if the Democratic Party just went all in on universal child care, universal health care, protecting abortion, paid family leave, just that kind of basic stuff that makes that makes people want to have families, you know. It's
Right.
not a fucking medal, which is literally Nazi shit. The Nazis would give out medals to heroes of German motherhood who had a lot of kids. And so when they said they were going to bring that back, it was just like, all right, guys, you're really still doing this. But, you know, and that is like those things that I mentioned, which are things that, you know, college educated white women, which are the, you know, most important part of the Democratic Party base, you know, overwhelmingly support and want and would organize for, you know, and obviously women of color and progressive men. But just even the base that is supposed to be so important to Democratic Party, it's like they can't even organize for that. And they're running on fucking lab meat and yimbyism. So, you know, I guess good luck is what I say to the Fight Oligarchy tour. And I think that's basically all I got.
Yeah, actually, we can end it on that note. There's actually, there's something I want actually for this other topic. I want to bring it up, but I'll tease it for like maybe a sort of bonus episode. But about like Black America and the African diaspora and like where to go forward, because I've also been thinking about like, okay, if we are living in imperial decline, which I think is kind of becoming certain at this point, if not certain, but like close to, like we're reaching a point where like the US as a sole world superpower, like those heydays are coming to an end. And what Trump is doing with his trade war is just accelerating it, and to the point where it's fucking suicidal. You know, if we're living through imperial decline, then where does Black America fit in with that? And should Black America keep tying itself with America? Because to me, it seems like a perfect time for Black America to think seriously about Pan-Africanism on a political, economic, and cultural level. Because there are countries like for example, like Burkina Faso. So the namesake of this podcast, Thomas Sankara, of Burkina Faso, there's this leader in Burkina Faso named Ibrahim Traoré. So Burkina Faso is offering citizenship for the African diaspora. And so like, as a final note, and to kind of round up everything we're talking about, when it comes to Black people in Black America, I think what's clear is like, obviously the Republicans don't give a fuck about Black America. The Democrats is just like, I think that the Black community is in like this weird abusive relationship with the Democratic Party where it's just like pure neglect. And so it's like, okay, I've noticed more Black Americans becoming more jaded with the two-party system. So like, you know, where do we go from there? So I'll save like the kind of citizenship part, Pan-Africanism, for like another episode, but I just want to put a pin on that. And also as a teaser, like if you like this episode, what else to look forward to. But anyway, like I'll come back to like what we've been talking about and round it all up. This Fight Oligarchy tour, Trump's tariffs and trade war. I think the Fight Oligarchy tour is a joke. I don't take it seriously. I do think that it's a good thing that there are more mainstream Democrats and liberals becoming pissed off with the Democratic Party leadership, because I think that shows like, okay, people are pissed off at not just Trump, but at the Democratic Party leadership, I think that's a sign of like, okay, potential to push some of those people further left. So I welcome that. I think it's a good thing, but I definitely think it's very clear that the goal of Bernie Sanders and AOC is basically to put that energy back into the Democratic Party. Like I definitely do. I think it's. I don't think I can't. I can't picture AOC trying to carve off and create like a third party. Like it does feel like Obama 2.0 basically, but more a left wing in terms of rhetoric. And it's just going to suck people back into the Democratic Party and the two party system, and nothing will fundamentally change. So yeah, I think that Fight Oligarchy tour is a joke, and when it comes to where the U.S. is at, like I mean, I don't want to comment too much on the trade war right now because like there's so much shit that's because like shit keeps changing every fucking day. But so I do think we're living through like some period like the I would say probably the beginning period of imperial decline for America. I think it seems like that's kind of where we're at, and it's wild to kind of live through it and try to process it. So, I think going forward, like I'm gonna keep analyzing and processing it because like there's a lot that keeps happening that remains to be seen. Nothing seems for certain, but I do think there's a lot to chew on, especially in terms of like what the left should do in this moment. Anyway, that's pretty much what I gotta say. Like, I don't know if I have anything else.
Yeah, no. Well, when you're at the top, there's nowhere to go but down. So,
yeah.
All right.
Okay, so if you like this episode, again, $5 a month at patreon.com/realsoncarhours. $5 a month makes you a patron, and you get access to bonus episodes. $3 a month, you can just basically become a supporter of of the podcast, but you won't get access to bonus material. But again, like we're on YouTube now, which I'm excited about because that gives us a chance to expand our reach. We're on SoundCloud, Spotify, elsewhere. So if you like this episode, share it with a friend, discuss it, and we have more fun stuff with our bonus episodes, which are behind a paywall. And I think I'll save my thoughts about Black America, the African diaspora, and citizenship in Burkina Faso. I think I'll save that. I might even record that solo, or I don't know, but definitely save that for a bonus episode. But that's a teaser. If you want to know, if you want our thoughts on that, then you should become a patron of our podcast and support independent Black media. Do you have anything else to say to Peter? Otherwise, we can sign.
No.
Okay. All right, cool. We'll sign out. Keep the faith.
Stay dangerous.
All right, peace, guys.
All right, see ya.
Hey everyone, this is Adam here. Today is Wednesday, May 14th, 2025. Obviously, like a couple weeks after the day that we recorded that episode, April 24th. Quite a bit has happened since then, so I just wanted to add basically an addendum, an update really, to two of the issues that we talked about in that episode, because there are some important updates that happened that I thought are worth mentioning, at least in this episode. First one, so David Hogg, DNC. I won't touch on this too long, but he. So the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, they're moving forward with ousting David Hogg as vice chair. And he and Pennsylvania State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta, they were elected as vice chairs of the Democratic National Committee. I just watched Sabby Sabs on YouTube, and she had a pretty good breakdown of this. And they're using like a sort of technical thing to justify it. So a candidate who lost in the February vice chair race, Kaylin Free, in Axios says that she has alleged that Hogg and Kenyatta were elected under a flawed tabulation process. And Hogg said in his statement that he had nothing to do with the alleged procedural flub, and that too many leaders in the Democratic Party are asleep at the wheel. I mean, this seems like they're nitpicking at something procedural to justify them getting David Hogg out, because obviously, like, he's pissed off a lot of Democratic Party elites, people who run the party. They didn't like that, and so I think they're using this as an excuse to get him out. And it also proves, like, you know, you can't reform the Democratic Party. So I'm not going to keep beating that dead horse, at least for this podcast episode. But I wanted to give that update that the DNC is moving forward with getting David Hogg out of there. So that's the first thing. Second thing, trade war. Trump's fucking trade war. We talked about that. An important update. In the past week really, it's been a week. There have been trade agreements signed with between the U.S. and the UK, and the U.S. and China. So with the UK, there was a trade deal, and then a couple days after that, there was a trade agreement between the U.S. and China. Essentially, both sides agreed to pause the reciprocal tariffs, which pretty much got to over 120%. There is an article in NBC News titled, is released today actually, Trump's trade war wins so far. More talk, uncertainty, and deadlines. So basically the U.S. didn't get shit. The UK and China got more, but Trump, like, he's supposed to be president deals, like art of the deal and all that shit. And the U.S. didn't get anything. And certainly, like, the U.S. workers haven't gotten anything. One would think that, like, U.S. manufacturers and companies would get something, but no, they didn't get anything either. So I'll just read a couple passages from this and then close out. More than a month after President Donald Trump's tariff-focused, it's so weird in this article, like tariff-focused Liberation Day, just about all America has won is more deadlines and assurances of ongoing talks. With China, the U.S. has secured no major changes other than offsetting step-downs of recent import duties and import restrictions. So the U.S. didn't get shit except for pausing the tariffs. And an accord with the UK announced last Wednesday offered little beyond improved access for U.S. meats and ethanol. The U.S. has said both agreements are starting points. While it's been enough to soothe international markets and restore U.S. stock gains, the Trump administration has little to show in the way of concessions gained from the agreements. The UK agreement saw British businesses win clear concessions from the Trump administration, including lower U.S. trade barriers for its vehicles, steel, and aluminum products. Less clear were the immediate gains for America. Yeah, so the UK got something. The gains for the US, like, didn't get shit. Basically, though the pact touted improved access to US markets for American meat producers, methods of meat preparation common in the US are banned in the UK, a stance it is not expected to change. Yeah, because America's food industry, like, there's all kinds of, like, so that's what's weird. Yeah, some of the stuff that's, like, in U.S. food is actually banned in other countries, which will kind of, it's like one of many things behind like some of the health problems that a lot of Americans face. Like the food we eat is not good for us. And yeah, like the U.S. doesn't ban certain shit that gets put in our food that other countries do ban. Meanwhile, representatives for American auto firms, which have already struggled to navigate Trump's tariffs, issued a rare statement blasting the deal. We are disappointed with the administration that the administration prioritized the UK ahead of our North American partners, Matt Blunt, president of the American Automotive Policy Council, said in a statement. So, the U.S. didn't really get much in the trade deal with the UK. And then China, same thing, didn't get much. But the deal announcements kept coming. Days later, representatives from the U.S. and China said that they had agreed to temporarily lower reciprocal tariffs, which had reached more than 120%. Again, the announcement was met with questions about its success. Capital Economics, a Wall Street consultancy, called it another substantial retreat from the Trump administration's aggressive stance. The firm said in a note to clients that the deal does not include any commitments by China on exchange rate policy or the bilateral trade imbalance. They stood their ground, Marcus Noland, an economist and senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics out of China. They faced a bully, and the United States backed down without any major concession. So basically, China like won, at least for now. The U.S. didn't get anything. Like, and this is, yeah, the Trump just was just like making China like trying to start shit with China, and basically got punked. Didn't get shit. China has hailed the outcome of its negotiations, saying its resistance to Trump's tariffs had been very effective. The retaliatory measures have indeed had a significant impact on the U.S. side, which is why the U.S. government lowered the tariffs to the baseline level after the talks, a social media account linked to China's national broadcaster CCTV said Monday. Yeah. I mean, because, like, the thing is China has a strong enough manufacturing base, and they produce enough of their own stuff that, they were in a better position to handle the outfall of this trade war, whereas the U.S. just wasn't. So, yeah. Anyway, I don't have much else to add. Obviously, like, it's something to still follow, but as of now, yeah, there's like a 90-day pause on basically the reciprocal tariffs between the U.S. and China. Obviously, like the context we had in this episode is really important. Helps contextualize like why all this shit is happening, deindustrialization, and all that. So anyway, just wanted to give those two updates on those stories. Like I said, if you like this free episode, you can become a patron at patreon.com/realsankarhours, and we also have our website, realsankarhours.org. And we're also uploading more of our episodes on YouTube, so that's another way where you can reach us. So anyway, yeah, take care, everyone.